Welcome back to the Dynasty Grind. My name is Peter Howard at Pierre Howdy on Twitter and Threads and everywhere. You might need an app to find me and tell me how bad I am. I remembered that I had to do this show about 5 minutes ago while I was doing the dishes. So I have 5 minutes ago I was doing the dishes energy right after work. I did, however, find this shirt. It was in the bag that Ryan McDowell shoved in my chest before disappearing into the crowd at my live draft. So I'm assuming it's fantasy football related because I personally don't believe Ryan McDowell has anything other than fantasy football related clothes. And since this is America, I'm allowed to believe whatever I want. So, just let me have that belief. We talk about fantasy football every Wednesday, 9:30 till close, even when we nearly forget because we were doing the dishes. Apart from that 1 week where I took a vacation, I guess, to go do my live draft. Any questions, thoughts, comments, or ideas you might have about that topic, specifically Dynasty Fantasy Football, drop them in the comment section, whatever streaming platform you happen to be watching, or in fact not watching us on. And we'll be happy to bring it up. We do it democratically in order because we honestly, that's our level of thought process. That's the order they come in the little multi-stream chat they give us, so we just read them in order. That's how we do it. Thanks very much for joining us for another grind. If you are, and if you're not here to say that I think your feet look funny, and you can't pull off the color blue, so can't really get offended by that, can you? Hey Zach, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you? I'm having trouble streaming this to Twitter.
Wouldn't let. It said that yours was kicked, but it seems to be on there now. I'm guessing you fixed it. I don't know. It's not letting me go to my Twitter.
Mr. Musk has changed things. I think
yes,
you have to be verified to stream.
You need to be verified. Oh. Well, go figure. There's got to be a way I can share a link. There we go. View it on YouTube. There we go. Live and hashtag alive, as is the brand for another. I'm just going to read it out to you.
That's fine. I appreciate it.
It makes for good streaming content, I think.
You're pretty good. I still would give the edge to J Mike as far as reading tweets, phone books, whatever. But not bad.
I think that's an unfair comparison, but okay. Yeah.
Tweety. Hey, Drew, how's it going tonight?
Oh, we got someone. Hey,
Drew's in the chat. Yeah.
See about that, Mr. Musk. Anyway, my Scott Fishbowl. I think ADHD got his website back up and running, so you can check out all the Scott Fishbowl drafts through the usual app there. And I keep meaning to go look. But mine concluded. I think I took Tutu Atwell with my last pick because it just felt apropos. I was like, you know what? Yeah, because there was no one screaming to me. Done.
I'm still waiting. It's Sunday. Sunday is the final Scott Fishbowl Live, the gala in Boston, and that's when I draft. So we're not there yet. I still have not made a bad pick in Scott Fishbowl 14. So
Drake London, yeah, we were just talking about that, Drew, before we came on. We both agree there's reasons, fairly decent reasons to be excited about Atlanta. I think we're 1-to-1 on our expectation, but I'm more likely to spread hate than cheer compared to Zach, at least. And I can't help hating every time I hear about how great Atlanta's going to be this year. I don't have those warm and fuzzies like everyone else, I don't think. It's a lot. I think the basic underlying expectation is Drake London is now Justin Jefferson. And I think that in and of itself tells the story of what's wrong with this particular assumption. Like, it ain't that. There's some hope that there's a little bit of a better offense, more volume going around because there'll be more passing heavy. But they still have to be successful on the passes in order to actually get to a higher volume line. And I think the players have done relatively fine so far, but none of them are going to turn into Jefferson. None of them are going to turn into Diggs.
I have a question for you. If I were putting you in a startup draft and forcing you to take one of these two players coming around to start your fourth round, would you take Nico Collins or Drake London? Which one would you rather have?
That's pretty close. Who else is on the board?
Well, no, and so
no, it's obviously a tier of wide receiver I'm a little sketchy on, but I don't know.
Because like that's the tier. Like, so London is going in the, and I purposely left out Jalen Waddle because I know that you would go directly to Waddle, and I don't blame you there. But like,
that's the answer.
The area that London is going in is in that area of Olave, Waddle, Nico Collins, Brandon Ayuk, Devontae Smith, and then you're into like Rome Odunze, DK Metcalf, Pittman. That so like
pretty close to Chris Olave as well. Last time I updated my Dynasty ADP,
and you and I are lower on Olave than a lot of the community too. And it's not that Olave and London aren't talented players, because they are, but if you're having to draft them in the top 10 or 11 or 12 receivers, the return on investment there is dubious at best, because not only are there players that are going to get back into the top tier above them scoring wise, not necessarily value wise, but scoring wise, every year, but also you're probably going to add wide receivers in draft classes that are above them as well. And so it's an interesting, to me, they're going higher than they should be. And there's more value going somewhere else. And it's, again, like Drew, I know we've gone back and forth and we've beaten around on this Drake London thing, but like, he was never, to me, even coming out in 2022, looking at that draft class, Drake London to me was not that upper echelon ceiling guy. Like, he's fine. He's Michael Pittman. Like that's a really, to me, that's a really fair assessment of what Drake London is. And Michael Pittman is good. Like, I enjoy rostering Michael Pittman, but I enjoy rostering Michael Pittman because I could get him in the second of a rookie draft. I could get him as wide receiver 20 and he scores, wide receiver 16 and I'm happy, as opposed to London where you get him wide receiver 12. And if he scores wide receiver 16 for the next 3 years, you're not as thrilled with that.
I had him second, wide receiver 2, coming out just above Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, which sucks for me in hindsight. But I think I stand by most of my notes. The question is simple. Can a contested catch guy hit the NFL? Hit in the NFL. It doesn't happen often, but there's a ceiling when it does. La, 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 la. And London did pretty fine. Yeah, I don't like contested catch guys. There is a ceiling there for the few that hit. But I think the results are very muted for the majority who even do pretty well. They're Drake London. They're what Drake London has been. That's what I think Drake London is. And so far, I think my analysis on him bore out. And I don't like the idea now he's much better because Kirk Cousins, for a start, like, that statement in and of itself is a bit weird. Like, in a year when you start thinking, "Ooh, the wide receiver of Kirk Cousins is no doubt good." Kirk Cousins is fine; he's decent, but it doesn't make again, I stand by the original. It doesn't make Drake London or even Pitts anywhere near Kelsey and Jefferson expectation. And I think that's where we end up being lower. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll be maybe pretty good, but I don't think I'll become like a dynasty wide receiver 3 off of this ever. And I think that's where some of the expectations.
Do you?
No, not Justin. How about AJ? No, you see, no. AJ Brown is disrespected in a second tier below Kelsey, and Chase. But that's because those two are always going to have more premium value because they just got better hype and more consistent scoring over a long period of time. But he's in the AJ Brown, CD Lamb tier. That for me is outside of the range of outcomes for Drake London, like heavily outside of it in terms of a dynasty asset. In terms of a single season, could it get there? I think it would fade eventually, but I guess people get their coverage all the time.
I think the thing that people are missing with the entire Falcons offense and bringing Cousins in is the fact that the Falcons threw 530 times last year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kirk Cousins is not going to come in and all of a sudden raise that up by 150 pass attempts. Like Kirk Cousins, the most pass attempts that he ever had in a season was 640, but his average is somewhere around 550. So you're not looking at a huge increase in pass attempts. London already had a 23% target share of the passes from last year. So like you're going to get a little bit better target and a few more targets, but like 23%.
So you get me a little bit with the quality. I would agree with that. I think Kirk Cousins is an upgrade from what they've seen before, and I think these are pretty decent receivers. They could have a better year than they've had before. La la la. I get all that, but to your point, like the amount of times they've thrown is more than enough. If Jefferson was there, he would have been fucking Jefferson in the Atlanta offense last year. It's not like even if they added 150 extra targets, one, the quality would have to be there to sustain that level of passing in a game by game. They have to be succeeding on it. In which case, the moon. But it won't. Like even a meteoric-wise would be an extra 50 passing attempts?
Right.
That's not enough to spread through an offense and make Drake London anywhere near A.J. Brown's ceiling or his peak so far, unless he's suddenly doing trying to swear less. So I remember I was doing the dishes 10 minutes ago. Like a hell of a lot. He was doing very non-Drake London-like things next year as well. He would have to revolutionize what he's currently put on stats, on tape, whatever. Like Jefferson would do that there. Sure. AJ Brown would do that there. Sure. That's why they're in different tiers for me. I tier based on my expectations for the players, and I don't think the way we think about targets is healthy. I think this is all a vacated targets nightmare or the run on from. Like more volume is good because more volume would mean the team would be succeeding and therefore sustaining that passing. But you don't say they're going to throw 50 times so that they succeed. No, they have to succeed to get there for a start. Yeah. And the quality of Kirk Cousins passing, I think, is a fair argument for how they can sustain better, but they don't have to go up 100 targets. They don't have to go 50. They just have to do better with the 500 and whatever you said passing targets they had already. The expectation shouldn't be there's an extra 100 targets, therefore Drake London can't fail. I think that's vacated target reasoning. I think there's literally no basis to ever have vacated target like reasoning because it's never happened, doesn't work, and it leads to like the busts every year. That's where draft capital gets wasted every year. And I just don't think, and I think that's where it's coming from. There's a very reasonable argument that you're making for this is a good situation, and I agree, but I don't think that's how people are getting to the Drake London Pitts arc. They're going through this side route, which is entirely terrible.
And I think, Drew, like I mean, we're having to kind of stand on the negative because people are being so over the top positive of this. But don't hear this and hear us say that Drake London is a bad player because he's not.
Or gonna fail. No, he'll be.
He's
fine.
A good player. He should be the best. He's been the best receiving target on that team for the last 2 years. He probably will continue that. I don't expect his target share to go down. You may see a few more touchdowns because Atlanta has not scored
and Kirk Cousins
at
should
all.
provide
And
better
Kirk Cousins,
quality in
so
the
like,
red zone. Like
yeah,
that's
so like,
sure.
there's going to be there's a little bit of upside, but to expect him to suddenly be a top 5 receiver, like that to me just
or AJ
isn't.
Brown or CD Lamb last year, or like
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, I think we're going through a side door to get to, and it sounds like a decent conclusion, but it's
and
like if you're looking at your roster and you think, and I have Drake London as my wide receiver too, like, and therefore I'm competitive, I worry for your team. Like if that's the edge on your team, like it would be nice. He has a top 12 ceiling, sure. I mean, technically, that could definitely happen this year. Don't get me wrong. Like Zach's trying to modify my negativity here. Yeah, he could finish in the top 12. You could be really happy to have Drake London. I don't think your expectation should be based on Drake London getting into the top 12. If that makes sense, like it's like a value argument, but from a points per game perspective, if your team needs that, then it's it's off balance, if you know what I mean. If it would be nice, but you don't need it to be competitive this year, and he could just be Drake London or Michael Pittman, is another good name, then you're fine. You're right in there in that value window. I'm very happy. If you just want to be excited about that potential, that's great. But I think that's a lot of where these bubbles come from. And Drake London and Brandon Ayuk go back into the fourth for one last loss of value because we just can't stop hoping to give away all of our value on the same weird ass arguments. Like Drake London, a round or two later, around about where I have him, is an excellent bet. 2 rounds higher, and it's suddenly that's why we bleed dynasty value for bad arguments. I think that's me. I mean, you know, I've been owned by Nico Collins last year, so I don't know.
Well, and I think but that's the thing too, Pete, is the way you and sometimes it doesn't always like. I think you've been doing this long enough and explained this so many times that sometimes you forget that people don't like understand how you're attacking this. It's not a Drake London will fail. It's the Drake London profile, the non like elite player after 2 years becoming elite doesn't happen very often. And so the bet is
you could even be a little more nice as often as something else. Yeah.
Like the bet is against it, not saying that that's impossible. But man, history has shown us that profile, you know, you kind of believe what it is, even if situation changes. And I mean, it's kind of why we bet on, like, it's why we bet on talent and profile with wide receiver, because they're the one. I mean, it was why AJ Brown was fantastic, even in Tennessee, when Tennessee, whoa, they're never going to throw the ball, and this is going to be a terrible offense. But A.J. Brown was still A.J. Brown coming out in that first year because he's good. Because he ties into targets.
That's my understanding of targets and why I come to my conclusion. But I think it also, you're right, it ties into a broader way of I play Dynasty. Drake London could be the best wide receiver in the NFL for fantasy this year, and I don't lose on it. I don't gain on it, don't get me wrong, by not trading for him and such. But I think chasing sleepers or this level of value bet, like overpricing it, we keep talking about values and bets, but that's essentially what you're doing. You're putting yourself in a position where if you don't get it, you lose a little bit. And if you do get it, you rise a little. It's good. Don't get me wrong. Let's not take away people's enthusiasm because they should be excited about a player they like in a good situation. But like, and it'll feel great this year until you realize, and this is the same with sleepers or betting on Puka Nakua's profile and doing that repeatedly in order to catch one. You have to make 10 bad bets to get there.
Right.
More than that, actually, and normally you don't get the one, but sometimes you get the one. If you go down that road, or like having that as part of a dynasty process means you lose more than you win, even when you win. Like dynasty rosters bleed this way. I think it's a losing way to play fantasy. And so even when you get it right, if Drake London hits the top 12 this year at his current hype value level, you win. Don't get me wrong. You'll be great. Awesome. But I actually think it's a negative for the whole way of playing dynasty because you're going to lose that bet more often. and saying, I'm only doing it this time. No, you're not, especially not if it works. You'll be like, well, remember Drake London the next time you find the argument or find another player you like in a good situation, and unknowingly follow a vacated targets argument. Whereas myself, I try and insulate myself from that. So yeah, if I've got Drake London on my team, I'm not unhappy. And if I trade him away, it's at that hyped value window. And if not, I'll see how the season plays out and be as happy as everyone else if it should happen. And I think the floor is still going to be pretty nice. I don't think, like Zach says, I'm not trying to say Drake London's suddenly going to be bad. But if I don't have Drake London to go get him right now, that would be a dangerous thing for me, because then you encourage that risk. And that's not the type of risk, the one that doesn't happen as often, that I'm trying to get. Now, if you have him, cool. Again, back to the first statement. You're pretty good. Don't worry about it. But that's why I start harping on the negative, because a lot of people develop a process around Dynasty based on following good accounts who talk about players they like in good, this kind of argument, or the Brandon Ayuk argument. And after a while, you figure out you're making good bets, and I'm following the process, and I'm chasing the right ideas. And it's not until you start looking back or you start counting or keeping track of it, like, I keep going for this kind of thing. And that's why my team isn't improving or becoming more competitive, even when I'm getting it right. My value is flowing into this lower odds bet that's not hitting nearly enough to justify it. And again, because I played like that. I came in like everyone else, listening to the popular, cruel, somehow they do it, fantasy analysts, and started chasing them. And pretty quickly you realize you're not winning. And there's a dominant dynasty team already. And once the dynasty league, as most people know, stratify like that, it's really difficult to start shifting those boundaries. So you find yourself in the middle or the bottom, even though you're doing all the right things. It's because they're actually not all the right things. And again, remember the first answer, it's not wrong. You can't own them for liking Drake London or say, you ruined my dynasty team, because there's a decent argument there. But it gets built up so much that in a dynasty landscape, you end up being one of those teams that simply can't compete. And you have to find another way of playing. And hopefully you find one that works more often, more time, over a longer period of time, even though, no one likes you. And you don't get all the fun of Puka Nacua last year, to be clear. I mean, that's more fun. Hitting that bet in the fourth round in a rookie draft must be exciting. But
the good news, though,
it's a good way of playing Dynasty.
Peter, the good news is, in order for Drake London to go from what he did last year to being a top 12 wide receiver, he only needs to score 22 more touchdowns this year. So, like, it's in the
that's
range.
I mean, I can count to 22, so it's not that high. I can envision it. It's not like a football stadium.
I think that's the thing that people don't like. It's nice to dream on a guy, but you also have to, like, come in and kind of ground yourself in reality. And, like, if he's like solid top 24 wide receiver, like, you're happy with that, unless you drafted him, highly. Now, Drew says, this is from a dynasty perspective, I drafted him as a rookie, as a first round pick. Again, depends on where in the first round, but you also hit
more than that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're doing great. But if you got a trade in your inbox right now, which was for like Waddle and anything, or Chris Olave and something, or Saquon Barkley and something, because that's the value range we're talking, and you were not considering it because of the potential, that's where I'm saying successful way of playing Dynasty diverges from chasing sleepers, which is a lot more fun. And if, fun's fun, play for what you want. And if it hits, you feel great, but your team still won't be winning as well as even if you took the other direction, even if Drake London hits, because you're not building on the success you've already had. And you find yourself in the middle or towards the bottom, even though you're hitting on all these great players. And my whole little rant there, it circles around. And I'm not, like, this is 100% true, but this is my experience in Dynasty. Like, I chased that. And I chased it, I think, smart, looking for lower value pets that hit at a similar rate. It's where my undrafted free agent love came from, or lower drafted players, because there are trends to it. And I caught Adam Thielen, and I caught, I forget the name. So I caught Cameron Meredith. That first year was a value win for me. So was Tyrell Williams. Literally anyone drafted outside the fourth round I was catching. And I wasn't improving. So Dynasty team doesn't improve that way. You're having to spend too much on the lower odds bets to get there, even when you're succeeding at slightly edgier, more successful, or at least similarly hit rate successful bets. Like it just, that was my experience. And when the more I look at it and look at the ways of playing Dynasty, the more research I do, the more I think that's always just going to compound. And Drew, we're not talking about, again, your situation's great, right? We're talking about if you had a trade, why I would go the other way. If you were shopping for a trade, I would not do Drake London for anything less than one of those trades that is literally someone in that range with a plus. And you would probably like those trades too. The no-brainer, yes, trades. And that's the point. Like, you're excited about Drake London, but at his value level right now, any trade that's reasonable in his range is probably a no-brainer, yes, outside of, I really like Drake London, which again is also fine.
Can we go down? Like he kind of tries to rebut where he says, "I just think AJ Brown wasn't a top dynasty wide receiver until he went to the Eagles." In his first year, AJ Brown was wide receiver 6. Like overall, was 17 and a half points a game. PBR, and then his second year when that offense was just abysmal, he was still almost 15 points a game and was like wide receiver
when he's healthy. That's what he does.
Yeah. Like, so it's not like these are apples and oranges, and it's not fair to Drake London to be like, hey, you need to be AJ Brown, because he like.
That's another way of looking at it. I used to frame it that way. Fairness to the player. Like, you're going to be mad at him if he puts up 14 points per game and is Michael Pittman solid every week. Like, screw that. We're really excited about London because that would be a hell of a season for him. And even better would be even, more fantastic, which, again, is possible. Kid Coop, hey, fellas, draft next week. 12 teams with flex. PPR. I have the 106 and the 108. QBs are Watson, Young, Lance. Pickett, Browning, AOC. I don't know.
O'Connell. Raiders backup. Either that or we got a representative from New York, but I'm pretty sure the backup for the
probably. Lamb, Ayuk, DJ Moore, Addison, Reed, Moore, Burks, Mims. Set that running back. 104 is probably going Bowers. 107 has Lamar at QB. Would you take Rome at 106 with all the question marks? With my wide receivers, take whoever falls, May or JJ. We have ranks. We're talking about this ad nauseum. I'm just going to do my quick bits because I keep ranting tonight. Yeah, there's really only 3 quarterbacks I'm considering over a certain the first wide receiver tier, who won't be available to you at your pick at 6. So the next group of players I'm interested in is Worthy and then Rome, and Brock Bowers ahead of them. So those would be the 3 that I'm hoping to fall in the range, and that's the order I would take him. You can take Rome over Worthy. That's your, don't let me rank players for you, but I do think that's a good range for Worthy, and I would prefer Worthy over Rome. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not doing that. I know this player's Drake London. This is my evaluation of it. I'm pretty happy with him in the same tier. I have Worthy slightly ahead, but Bowers will be the guy I'm hoping to fall into that range. After that point, I'm honestly not interested in the quarterbacks you're mentioning, just because you need a quarterback. But yeah, most of them probably should be drafted by the end of the first round. So with your 108, if there's one there, I guess take your favorite, but I'm not overly excited about either of them. And that's a really good range for wide receivers. And again, I would take the best player, in your opinion, the one most likely to do something good this year, is another way of saying which is the best, over whatever your team need is. Zach, you probably remember your ranks better, so this is probably a bit.
You and I are almost in lockstep with our ranks this year, which is really really strange for me. It's interesting territory to be in, because you and I usually have 2 or 3 spots where we have like real battlegrounds, but this year we're really close. Now, what I might do, Kid Coop, is if you've got that 106 and there are teams that are willing to part with a quarterback to come up and get that pick, I would do that and add to your quarterback. And then at 108, I still think you're going to get Xavier Worthy there. because I
And
don't.
Worthy probably falls to 8. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
I
right.
don't believe that. I don't believe that somebody is going to. There's a real schism.
Or, sorry.
Oh no, there's a real schism with that 108 pick. Or like, and if Peter, if you're saying you could go pair one of these, Addison or Reed with the 108 and go move that for a quarterback, and then all of a sudden you can take whichever one you want of Odunze or Worthy. Like Peter and I still have Worthy a little bit ahead of Odunze. But that's not to say that we're necessarily right. That's just where Peter's ranks fell with the numbers, and that's where my film grade fell. And they jive pretty well this year.
No, I was going to add, I like that strategy as well, because the thing about the 108 or even the 19, 110, 111, if Worthy doesn't fall down there, which he does pretty often, if you're not in a league with like someone like us, there's a lot of nerds out there that love Worthy, and sometimes you'll find them snagging him slightly in front of you. But even if they do, the Denver wide receiver falls into that range pretty much constantly, even the early second. I have him just behind those guys, so I'm actually okay with snatching that guy. And I'm forgetting it's Brian Thomas.
No,
right?
Jacksonville. Yeah, Jacksonville.
Yep. Not Denver, sorry. I'm pretty happy to snag that guy if Worthy's gone. So if you were shopping the 106, you have backups on backups with that 108, and I still think you're grabbing a pretty decent wide receiver shot, so you don't even have to. And I would add the 106 to any of your QBs to get one of them upgraded, or outright, like Zach says, just get a QB.
And I think that's the thing that you have to think of. These draft picks are money, they're currency until you make that pick. And then you're spending that pick to either get the rookie who's an unknown or to go trade for maybe the less sexy veteran who you have a little more idea of what you're going to get back. So it's don't think of these picks as you have to take the rookies yet. They're still currency. They're still fungible. There's still a lot of things you can do with them before you have to make that pick. But I'm with Peter. If you're going to make that pick, if you have to make that pick, I still have Worthy and Odunze ahead of Drake London, and it would be Drake London for me out of those quarterbacks. It would not be JJ McCarthy. Because I had the quarterbacks for me were I had Daniels graded out like just a yet higher than Williams, but Daniels and Williams or Williams and Daniels, and then Drake May is the only other quarterback that I'm really interested in.
He'd be my third.
Yeah, so and I know there's been a lot of JJ McCarthy hype. I know that he won the national championship. I know that everyone saw him go to Minnesota, and so he's necessarily going to be the next Kirk Cousins. We just spent the first 15 minutes of the show telling you that Kirk Cousins is fine. But if you're going to make a bet in a rookie pick for a guy who like could possibly, if you hold your face just right, become Kirk Cousins, like I'd rather take an upside swing either with May or with those three receivers.
And again, I'm not going to speak for Zach. I'm trying to talk through where my head would be at, because this is how I play Dynasty. You can take the parts of it that you like and throw away the rest, or you can just throw away all of it. To be clear, to the point that I'm trying to suggest moves to give you the idea of how I think about it. But you're based on what the teams in your league are doing and who's playing them. Some of them are possible, probably none of them are possible, because I don't know your league and I don't know your league mates. But it gives you an idea of what I'm shopping around for. And to that point, I'm thinking about your picks as currency in Zach's instance. You have wide receivers. I can see why you're a little skittish on why would I draft more great wide receivers, which, again, when you put it that way, probably a little weird to say, but that just adds to the thought process, right? Well, what can I get if I add the 106 to Ayuk or more? Probably more is a little under hype right now. Ayuk's got plenty of hype right now. Addison's in a low spot, so maybe not, but there is Jordan Reed Hive, right? If there's a Green Bay fan in your league or someone that really likes Reed, you're not taking advantage of them. You're just looking at what you have and what you need and finding paths to do it in your league with who's playing in your league. So you had 106 to to Reed, and the guy at the 103 really likes Reed, they might be interested in that. And you get one of the the better prospects at quarterback this year. Or maybe they have, I don't know, Jordan Love. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan, but Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert's in a bit of a low window. That might be shooting a little. Dak's always
so undervalued.
Right? So what team is he on? Do they have that to spare? If not, you might have to throw one of the quarterbacks in the deal. And again, I'm not prescribing a move. I'm telling you what I would be thinking about as I looked at the teams in my league to go for what you're saying you want. And I think adding a better or even doubling up and trying to get two better quarterbacks over time would be a great way to go forward with this team. And since that's your direction, that's how I'll be looking at the other teams. How can I get that with what I have? Instead of thinking more about prospects and bets and I'm going to hit on every pick. Instead, trying to find paths to the direction you want to build your team or move forward with your team, because building is a specific direction. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean, kid. Kid Coop. I wasn't like, hey, sporting you when I said kid, you know?
Buddy, old pal.
But yeah, and again, you can try all of that, and everyone's like, no, I want to see what happens with my players, because that's normally what happens in Dynasty. But I think that's what I would attempt to do, especially with the direction that you're wanting to go. Lemon, lots of dots.
Wait for it. Lemon.
Hey, Dave. Kevin, what's up, guys? Not much. Mostly just my hair. Yeah, it's up there. Nice to see you, man. Kiku. Okay, we went through that.
Same one. I don't want to end up with a crappy. We don't want you to end up with a crappy QB. So, like, again,
that's entirely the point. Like, I don't see a great one. One that I really want to snag after those first three, which is exactly, I go the same way you do. You're looking for other options to try and find that QB. So yeah, I would explore other options. If not, though, and again, everything turns down. You just have to make the pick. We told you the order we take players in, and regardless of what's on your team, that's the order I take them in rookie draft. I really don't. I want to cramp QB. And I just referred to that. London Love, if you're risky this year, feels like this year's the year their value drops if they underperform. Sideways, yeah, it could drop. Don't get me wrong; they're both pretty highly valued, but I think you end up in that Ayuk the last 2 years, or Pittman right now, or DJ Moore right now. Like, no one's low on them, especially if you're asking them to rank them. Well, maybe. But like, they're not trading them for free either. Well, in some leagues, maybe. But you know what I mean? The value kind of moves off to the side. The rank looks fine. No one's saying they hate them. And that's part of, also in your comment, risky isn't the word I apply to either. I think they've both established an ability to play at a pretty good level in the NFL. I think Olave's has been slightly more impressive than London's for me, because I'm more of a volume guy. But it's a different type of risk. The bet that the value rises carries with it more risk. That's true. Making a trade or not making a trade, making a trade offer or not making a trade offer. And this, in this window before we actually see the tires hit the road and what actually happens, there's risk to not making a move, just like there's risk to making a move right now in either. So in that way, there's risk. But I would, again, just back to Zach's point, I don't want to suck all the oxygen out of either room. Like, both are a lot less risky than rookies. Like, yes. Even the rookies I really like this year, outside of Neighbors and Harrison, which kind of get kind of close to that tier of value for me right now, because I feel pretty happy with it. They're still more risky. Like, if you can get Olave with a plus compared to for the Harrison pick or the Neighbors pick, depending on my team situation, there's an argument for it, because they are actually, there's some modified risk to them. But you are right about their value. It does seem like that crucial point, like, because there's expectations on it, where people are going to move them up, move them down, or they'll just kind of languish. Yeah.
We did that one, yeah.
Yes, we did. You did. And I let you. Brain Bus. How do you guys feel about Scott Fishbowl drafts? And Peter, what led you to take Justin Tucker in the third? I feel okay about mine. I didn't. The simple fact is that I took my wife and daughter up with me, kind of at the last minute. Hey, what you guys free? Why don't you come up? And we left the house like an hour after I said we absolutely have to leave the house. And that's what happened. So I turned up for the fourth pick. Like that's
Peter
when
is
I arrived in the door.
the only
And
person I
John-
know who could get auto drafted in a live draft.
Yeah,
It's impressive.
And John Bosch was mad and drunk at that point and was like, "I'm not going with ADP anymore. I'm taking Justin Tucker." That was his punishment for it, I guess. That's what happened. I actually don't mind what ADP did for me. It grabbed a running back, which I think is a little bit undervalued in the early rounds in Scott Fishbowl. I don't know I would have gone that way. I'm a lemming like everyone else when it comes to redraft, and I wanted to double hit QB because Kyler Murray had already gone, so I'm not sure what I would have done, to be honest. I was going to take Kyler and Dak. Kyler right on ADP, Dak a little earlier in ADP, and just feel pretty happy with, I wasn't going to foul out the Scott Fishbowl too badly. But trying to shoot for higher climates, Breece Hall's a better pick there. I'm not sure I would have been brave enough to do it for myself, because he's a running back and I'm a dynasty nerd. But it might have actually helped me out a little bit. So yeah, I don't mind what it did with the first two.
I still haven't made a bad pick in the Scott Fishbowl.
You're just talented like that.
Yeah.
Zero.
Still, I'm still waiting. We're Sunday, so it's happening. It's happening. But it's Sunday.
Professional, no, Drew. I do think, and that's honestly a lesson I learned I need to figure this out because following people I think know what they're doing and they're smart and they're funny and entertaining is not working out for me. One of the things I found, one of the earliest lessons was just having a memory, which isn't my strong suit actually, which is again where I take spreadsheets. It's like Waddle right now. Waddle's a top 12 wide receiver as a rookie. That's a phenomenally rare feat. And now he's sunk into this range of players who are interesting and value and everything we just said, but have never come close to sniffing the top 12. Waddle did it as a rookie. It's a really significant landmark. And just having a memory like that, and that's why Zach knew I'd go straight to him if he put him in that list. Just having a memory for stuff like that. It's when Cooper Kupp hit the top 5 again. Everyone's like, no one could have expected this. It's like, this is
we did a whole show on that.
Dude.
Yeah.
Literally the second time. Like, we've been here before. You're all dynasty nerds. How do you not know this? Like, it was pretty significant at the time. And just having a memory for stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes players never get back to their ceilings. It happens. But having a memory, especially when they start falling, because it's been a while and they're old toys and no one wants to play with them anymore, is a wonderful advantage in Dynasty. Because even some of the smartest, knowledgeable people are like, was Cooper Kupp really in the top 5 before? Like, yeah, two years before he just did it.
and that's the other thing, Peter and Drew, that it's not like we're not any smarter than anybody else for sure.
Absolutely.
But the thing that both of us do really well is challenge narratives. We're like, no, I don't believe you, and then we go look and see like what is actually going on. And so like, don't just take like if I say something like, don't just take my word for it. Go challenge it. Go try to break it. And if you can break it, then great, you're ahead of the game. And if you can't break it, then use it to your advantage. Like that's what
is. Yeah, both of our actual approach. Like my initial reaction is I'm going to prove that wrong. And if I can't, I'm like, oh, cool, I found something real. And there's very, very few things that you can't at least find a lot of wiggle room in because fantasy football, there really is not a lot of stuff you can depend on.
Well,
and
there's so many variables within like football, not just like set fantasy aside. There's so many variables within football that contribute to a player's success. I mean, obviously the biggest variable is whether or not they're talented, but then there is whether or not they can stay healthy. What do they fit in as a scheme? You know, are they being used in play? Like, I still think Rondale Moore is a viable NFL receiver, but not if you use him 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage and let him just get eaten by whoever the linebacker is or the corner. You know, you've got to let him be quick and catch them. But anyway, like there's so many variables that for us or anybody to be like, yes, we know this is right, is completely asinine. But also, like, people will do that, and so you have to kind of ferret out when people are being asinine and like call them, and especially when it's narrative driven. AJ Brown, yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, like AJ Brown sucks, or like this year, like people are gonna like Cooper Kupp is way down, and yes, he's 30, but also if you
has
look
he really
at,
been in the top 5 again? It's cut to a year later, twice.
and so like you've got to have a long enough memory to be able to pull that thread to go back and look and say, okay,
and
I
still
remember
remembering
this.
it can not work out. Like, again, never throw the house. Everyone's being too low on Cooper Kupp. True, but I'm not throwing the house. Like, if his value's down here, I'm not like, and here's 3 first-round picks because I know better. Like, I know there's significant leeway in that. And I do it it's being a dick. That's my way of playing fantasy football. I don't believe you. I'm going to prove it wrong. But to be fair, I do it to myself. The most recent one I found was thinking wide receivers have been breaking out too much recently. So I wanted the older ones, which typically is my way anyway. So that fits with my mantra. But there was actually fewer wide receivers in their first 3 years breaking into the top 12, literally in overall PPR scoring last year. And there was 8% of the top 12 were in the first 3 year breakouts 2 years ago, which is, okay, it's a normal year. This last year, 32% fewer top first 3 year breakouts. I know that's a mouthful. Players in their first 3 years broke into the top 12, 30% less than they do on average. So even though we've had this influx of great wide receivers, we still haven't seen as many year 1, 2, and 3 players hitting the top 12 overall in PPR scoring because of injuries and various other things, I'm sure, as we do on average. Now, does that mean it regresses naturally? And next year will be 80% top 12 breakouts will be wide receivers in the first 3 years? No, but it is interesting, isn't it, when you think about the landscape and the concern over the bubble, and year 1, 2, and wide receivers, the most challenging dynasty assets and the most biggest value climbs any player receives in dynasty. And the last 2 years were somewhat mediocre of them climbing into the top 12. We should actually probably expecting 2 or 3 top 12 wide receivers to be early career players who have not been there before. And I don't know exactly what to do with that, but it is in my head when I look at rosters and look at my ranks and I consider trades. Like, I probably want to be in on the wide receivers I think are really good, and they're still only in their first or second year in the NFL in 2024. Now, Drake London is a great example of that. He's a first 3 year player. Again, to throw some logs on that fire, there's very reasonable reasons to like Drake London right now. Don't get me wrong. And Jordan Anderson was a guy I would be heavily targeting until once again he proved he can't not drink and get in a car that's behind the wheel of a car, which is unfortunate. That's talking about all the different variables Zach was just mentioning again. There are just some you have no idea if that has an impact, if this is a pattern, if the NFL is going to start or his team's going to start to be dubious. Like, there are so I wouldn't even like to speculate. I hope not. But like, that reduces his risk despite that trend I just mentioned. So you allow reality and context in, especially with injuries and stuff like that. But I think it's interesting to note, and that was challenging myself. Like, wide receivers are going to break out as much next year, especially the young ones. We've had too many good young ones. Puka Nacua last year. And then you look at the numbers, you're like, oh, I'm entirely wrong. We've actually seen fewer players hit the top 12 the last 2 years than we should expect. So yeah, if it's any consolation, I'm a dick to myself too. And yeah, just even if it comes out your own mouth, especially if it's in my own head, I don't believe it.
Test it.
I want to try it. No, yeah, am I right on that one? Yeah. The Hex, what do you all think about Dontavian? I'm guessing Wicks, not the Wick franchise.
John,
yeah. I didn't think much. Too long didn't read. I think the Dontavian Wicks argument is this guy is so big and fast. If he was good, it would be amazing to draft him this late. But that clause there, if he was good, is really important to that argument. I haven't seen anything from college or in the NFL that suggests to me that that very important case for his potential breakout is there. That doesn't mean it's not, but I don't think he's done anything in the NFL or in college to really justify that he can cover that bit.
This is the
but down where he is, cool.
Yeah,
sure.
but this is the trap that you see people fall into a lot. Speaking of narratives, where he was so efficient on the number of touches that he had that obviously they'll just ratchet up the volume and he'll continue to be that efficient, and then he'll break. But that's not how it works. Like Dontavian Wicks is fine. Like don't get me wrong, but I don't think that he's going to be on the field in 3 or 2 wide receiver sets with the Packers. He may not even be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets because you have Watson, Doubs, and Reed. So there are enough decent players in that receiving core. I don't think any of them are great, but there are enough decent players in that receiving core that it ends up being really muddled. And so then you don't end up having the volume to get to the point where you're really hoping that Dontavian Wicks can be.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One reason, if you were going to describe them in simple terms accurately, volume is the amount that you have and efficiency is how good you are with it.
Right.
That's very true. But I think what we take away from that sometimes is this player is good on the touches that he has. So if you moved him over to this column, imagine. But put it another way, good wide receivers get more volume, or better wide receivers get more volume for fantasy. Let's just say fantasy. I'm not saying whether Wicks has talent to burn or not. Just for fantasy, the better wide receivers for fantasy get more volume. And if you're efficient on fewer targets, it's actually a small sample trap, but let's not get nerdy about it. There's a reason they weren't giving him more touches despite what he can do with them, because they saw that in practice. That's why they did it in the game. You know what I mean? And so the minute you start giving him more volume, you're going to see more of examples, not of that high level of efficiency, but why he had fewer targets in the first or touches in the first place. That's what happens like the majority of the time. And that's, not positional specific. And can efficiency lead to more volume? Yeah. And that's where we have to get a little bit nerdy. Good efficiency on significant volume is often an indicator a player gets more volume the following year, especially year 1 to year 2, which would fit nicely into the Wicks argument. He's pretty early on in his NFL career. You know what I mean? But you have to have a certain threshold of examples of volume to know that efficiency puts you in a category of a player more likely to get volume. And mostly the way that works for us as an advantage in fantasy is an article written by Blair Andrews, right?
Yep.
Rotoviz. Yep. I read it like 7 years ago, and it's still one of the only things I found to exploit efficiency is that running backs in year 1 who are efficient specifically in the receiving game reliably enter a more likely hit rate group. So it's not even they get more volume, they're more likely than not to get more significant value increase. Now, that is actually a really interesting edge. I always love Blair's work. He's a fantastic researcher, 100%, 100 million times better than I am. So I always read when he publishes something and remember it. But I would also say you could also just bet that year 1 to year 2 is the biggest volume increase of any point in an NFL player's career for every position. And players who get more volume are more likely to be the ones that get more volume the second year. As they improve, play more games in the offense, whatever that positional restrictions in the rookie career may have been. And that tends to be where it comes from more often. It's not players showing a lot of pizzazz on fewer touches in their rookie year, suddenly having that big volume increase. The reason that big volume increase happens is because the players who are already getting more than most ever get in their rookie year, because they're actually kind of unicornsy, getting even more involved in the offense. So yeah, that's what I can do with volume and efficiency there off of Wicks. Now, Wicks' value, despite high, probably isn't bad. If you've got him on your roster, you want to trade a late second or a third, I'm not going to hate. Like that's how you should shop for sleepers. But he is in that sleeper category, which is where dynasty value burns. If you're always throwing your second round picks at sleepers, then you never add them to something else to get something more substantial. There's only so much value in a dynasty league. That's my only problem with like the Wicks type bet. Not against Wicks, but as a process, whatever value you do throw at Wicks or have in Wicks that you don't combine with something else to get something that's a little less rare or a little more likely to actually be more solid, even if it doesn't have the exciting upside of sleeper hitting. It's a drag on your process. Not a significant one enough. I'm going to tell you to stop doing it if you like, but it is an area to be making sure you don't do it too often. If you're trading all your second round picks, that's fine, but make sure you're making increases at least more often than not. And the way to do that is, unfortunately, not draft your favorite sleepers. That's another reason I started hating sleepers. But yeah, I took that in a very different direction, probably the Hex. I can't give you a film breakdown on nothing. Zach, got anything about how good he is? How tall?
I give you my opinion is I think this is mostly narrative driven. He's efficient and hasn't had many targets, and so efficiency, he had 560 something yards and caught 39 balls. So everyone's like, oh, well, if he catches 80 balls, right, he's gonna have 1,400 yards, and that's not how this. It doesn't
he's on
work
pace
that
for
way.
the best wide receiver in the NFL. Yeah. James Jones, on a competitive team, I'm loaded at both QB and wide receiver. At 1 or 3, do you like Daniels or Malik Neighbors? I go QB, but I do think it's reasonable. Harrison and Neighbors, they're good enough profiles. If you just have to take him over a QB, I wouldn't take him over your favorite QB because honestly, you should take QB before wide receiver in those number one tiers. If you have that many QBs, and this year we do. We have at least two wide receivers are kind of in that top tier of this draft. They make up their own separate tier one of the draft properly. And if you want to take a wide receiver over another tier one player, I don't hate it. Like, how else do you get Neighbors or Harrison with only one first round pick spent? Because I think they're going to hit and they're immediately worth more than that once that happens. But what I would tell you to do, especially if it's actual advice, not just one guy talking to another guy about fantasy football, QB is the way to go. More reliable, more consistent. Even bad years produce less bad results, dynasty value-wise, and less lowering of expectations or potential to actually be fantasy significant moving forward. A bad year for a wide receiver is a death knell. Bad year for a QB, it's not good. It's Bryce Young. We're lower, but he hasn't dropped off the face of the earth. Whereas Burks, or even to an extent, JSN didn't have a terrible year last year. It was actually okay. It's borderline, but his value is still, it's harder to trade JSN comparatively than it is Young right now in a super flex league. You know what I mean? So there's less bad results for a QB hitting. And that's outside of the fact that the upside of Neighbors and Daniels and Williams hitting is much higher, in my opinion, their ultimate ceiling, the best they could do, than either Harrison or Neighbors. The likely outcomes probably about even, but like if pie in the sky, if just pick names at random, if Williams and or Daniels become Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert, there's a much higher ceiling. There's a higher ceiling than Jefferson and Chase in a superflex league, just to put it in broad terms. And they're in the same tier for me in terms of my expectations of them hitting pretty well in the NFL. So yeah, you can take the wide receiver if you want. I would tell you and should probably take the quarterback in a superflex league. But trades are possible too. Just saying. Zach, I'm ranting and raving tonight. Where you go?
No, I think I would take Jaden Daniels over Neighbors, but they're similar tier. Like they're all so. Like, to me, there are 5 players in this draft class that are pretty easily elite. So you've got Williams and Daniels. You have Harrison and Neighbors, and then Brock Bowers. To me, all 5 of those players, I'm ecstatic if I end up with.
Take your favorite kind of a thing, but you should probably take the QB. Yeah.
Well, but this is also one where, James, if you're loaded at quarterback and wide receiver and you have the 103, okay, what can you get, for a running back in trade for the 103 plus a pick for next year? And then all of a sudden you're stacked at 3 positions, plus you got extra ammunition next year to continue rolling. Like it's never an either or to me. There's always, like, especially with draft picks like that, everybody wants picks until you have your rookie draft. Everybody wants picks, so they are movable, they're valuable. They're not, because once you have a specific player, there are a finite number of teams who can use that player. Whether, if you're stacked at quarterback, you're not trading for a quarterback. Other teams, if they're stacked at wide receiver, they're not trading for a wide receiver. But everybody can use that 103 because it could be Bowers, it could be Daniels, it could be Neighbors, it could turn around and trade for somebody else. So, like, that's the way I always look at draft picks. But if you're asking me specifically, are you going to take Daniels or Neighbors? It's really close. I'm still taking Daniels, but it's some close.
Literally, and you can even just mollycoddle. You don't have to go and just trading out, because it sucks to leave a rookie draft. Like, literally, what will the 105, and then at least you're in that tier.
Yeah.
What will the 105 owner do? Go look at his team. What are his needs or her needs? And yeah, there are plenty of options. I'm not going to, again, never prescribe, but I think Zach's prescribing a good way of thinking about options you might want to find that you like. Alan Davis, Wicks is a 2-year stash just to have a piece of that up-and-coming defense along with Tucker Kraft for me. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. Like, Kraft as well. He can. I'll sleep along with everyone else. It's when it comes to decisions on that. Like, if Wicks is in a trade and he's being valued at a second, I think that's I want to be on the other side of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if Tucker Kraft is being, not that he is, but I think it's perfectly fine to have those stashes, especially when they come, in those late rookie draft picks or off waiver wires. Yeah. No, I like Dynasty too. I enjoy this. I'm just saying that there's a line of when they start becoming commodities. That's a horrible word, but available in trades. Like, people want them. There's interest in them. That's a different kettle of fish based on the trade as well. But yeah, I think it's perfectly fine.
I am a lot more likely to sit on a tight end for a couple of years than I am on a wide receiver. I think a wide receiver, planning to wait 3 years or 2 years on a wide receiver is the definition of roster clogger.
It does suck, and they normally end up there.
Yeah.
I would just, little asterisks on you. The lower the draft capital, the more okay I am with expecting a wait. The higher the draft capital, if you're holding on for 3 years, that's roster clogger 101. But Wicks, I can't remember where he's drafted. But if it was like the 4th round and you draft him in the 4th, 5th round of your rookie draft to hold on till now, I don't think that's roster cloggy. If you want to have a little fun at the back end of your roster, I think that's fine.
He was a 5th round.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of a now or never thing, though, maybe at that point. 5th round. Yeah, I think that's fine. Your expectations should slowly increase. Yeah. Just a little love for the low drafted players. They're still close to my heart. I think that's the way to do those kind of wide receiver bets, Like, it's like this year with Leggett and a few later 1st and early 2nd round picks are really clogging up the draft towards the end of the 1st round, in my opinion, and early 2nd. Those aren't the roster cloggers I want to target. Like, those are easily tradable, and I want out of that range if those guys are the ones that are there. Who's the other fella? It's I can't remember. I have to look at my range. Like it or not, I hit the like button. There's nothing you can do about it. No, Mr. Scampers. He got me. Thank you. James Tucker Richardson, injury prone. It's not really an injury prone thing, but I get what you mean. Or Kyler, destined for greatness or more COD for a win now window of 1 to 2 years. I would take Kyler every time. That's not to deny that Richardson probably has a little more upside, and the extent of upside that's in Richardson's range of outcomes. It's just that Kyler has been in that vague bank, that vicinity before. And I like having that memory thing. That's always kind of my default. And I think, why would we expect Kyler not to have a better? If he doesn't have a better year this year than we've seen, or back to his previous form, then there's a problem almost.
But again, now we're narrative though, Peter, because Kyler Murray he missed like 8 or 9 games last year, but in the games that he played, points per game, he was quarterback 9. He was still a top 10 quarterback, and everyone's like, he's terrible. It's the same thing as Dak Prescott, who was quarterback 5, and everyone's like, Dak is washed.
Nope,
it's like there's such a crazy narrative on these, and again, like Richardson for the community. So if you're in an active league and you want to have the ability to potentially get out from one of these quarterbacks if something bad happened, you're going to be able to get out from under Richardson. Like if Richardson goes another 3 games and gets hurt, people are still going to be excited about Richardson next year because they're going to talk about how he was in 2 games, he was quarterback, 4 or whatever. But
maybe
like I'm still on the Kyler Murray side of things, where he's been a great quarterback for the majority of his career, and I kind of expect that to continue. Where like Richardson,
I'm getting bored with my own. No, you're good. I keep getting reminders to update my ranks from Dynasty. Like I got a list of 20 players I need to go address apparently, and it's because I'm getting so bored with my ranks. Like Kyler Murray has been my top target in Dynasty for 3 years now, and it's worked every single time. Like even last year, to Zach's point, when he was startable, the points worked out, and his value didn't drop that significantly in terms of trade, especially when I'm holding him. This is very easily Kyler to me. It's a guy who's doing it versus a guy who could do it. Again, Richardson should actually probably. I mean, Zach likes to point out even his legs alone should at least put him in that tier this year if healthy.
Yeah.
To be fair, like not trying to. If you've got Richardson, you're like, oh, I need to get out of him. I feel that way, but Zach's absolutely right. Your expectation should be his legs is going to provide the points, even if the actual results are somewhat more mediocre. The points are going to be there if healthy. So don't let me suck all the air out of that room either. But for me, it's pretty.
But I think
1-on-1.
The thing with the Richardson narrative is people are expecting him to become a great passer he's never been. He literally never has been a great passer, and so like what you're getting is that. I mean, he doesn't run like Justin Fields, but that Justin Fields, like where he can be a top 5 quarterback, but he's not going to be a great NFL quarterback, which means that I'm treating him like a running back, where if I have Richardson, I'm going to start looking to trade him maybe after this year, either after this year or after next year. I'm starting to look to get out of Richardson because I play the running quarterbacks without the real dual threat. I play those like running backs.
Sell Drake London to a short-term dynasty player at going rate. I mean, what is going rate? I'm not trying to be sidesteppy here. I have no Drake London in my dynasty leagues, to be clear. If he hits this year, I will not get that benefit because I've never found him to be at value outside of I think I picked him up in the rookie draft once and I've traded him by now. But I would feel that way if I did. I can't act on what I'm saying because literally I've got no dynasty Drake London shares. But it's about the trade. Just one last little caveat. If you're getting London straight up for a first, I think you're being ripped off based on where he's being ranked. It's specifically based on where he's being ranked and drafted in startups and in mock ADP and stuff. Or hold tight, hoping QB situation makes a potential shine. I don't think this is what we were talking about earlier. I don't think you need to do either. It's about what the trade offers are or what trades are possible in your league. But I would consider him a shot candidate. Yeah, if you have other needs on your team or you see a team with a player you're targeting or in a situation that you think could match up to your team, Drake London is pretty much one of the first players I would start thinking about ideas that would benefit both of us. and because of that slight risk in his valuation right now that other person might not share. But that's where I would start off to see if I could benefit from it. So yeah, I would shop him around.
Yeah, well,
Garrett Wilson stuff.
No, like London is again currently going right at the cusp of being a wide receiver 1. So if you can get if you can trade him for that value, and Peter, we kind of danced around the players that were around him, but if you mentioned like all of these, where if you could go get Nico Collins plus, or Brandon Ayuk plus, or Devontae Smith plus, or if you could go get Waddle, anything like that, to me, you're ahead of the game on. If you could go get Travis Etienne plus,
that's
which
what I
think you can
switch positions, it gets even easier and makes even more sense. So yeah. So if you're building, you might not want to go to running back. There's still quarterbacks if it's a super flex, and there's tight ends that are really interesting right now too. Switching positions always seems to make trades make a little bit more sense, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, especially because you have to take into account your trade partner, and if your trade partner is lacking the same thing that you are, it's not a great it's not a great trade partnership, because you should be making both teams better ostensibly. Like that's the goal of trading is to make your team better, and from the other perspective, it's to make their team better. And so, like, if you can do that, if you can fit your trade together like a puzzle, but everyone's happy and you're better off.
I think I get your Garrett Wilson point at the end here, James, and we talked about him much in the same way. I don't think that anyone liked Garrett Wilson as much as Zach, as far as I can remember. He was big into him. I liked him a lot, but like I just mentioned, I had him ranked in the second tier with Olave. Maybe that situation made me a little concerned, confused. I think his rookie year was absolutely positive, but I think what you're referring to is the situation improving his outcome. And yeah, you're absolutely right that we're both a little dubious on that.
Hold on. This is totally different. Garrett Wilson targets in the last 2 years, 147 and 168. These two players are not the same, and Garrett Wilson is good. Garrett Wilson is driving almost like he's one of the top 3 or 4 target drivers in the NFL as a second-year player. His quarterback play has sucked, and this is coming from his quarterback play was worse than what Drake London saw. So these two players are not the same. He is doing what he needs to do in order to drive targets, but they're not getting to him. There is a difference.
And to my volume versus efficiency guy, London is over the threshold of guy with enough volume to consider that his efficiency is good. But when you're looking at two players, my default answer, although again, there's always more nuance, and that's why we have ranks and shit, is the guy getting more volume is better. And that's Wilson. And that's why I would have them slightly separated on that. But yeah, I think there's a similar comparison in terms of prospect up until this point. I don't know if James was meaning that, but I think that's interesting too. Missed on neighbors in my portfolio. That's okay. Too pricey to buy now, I assume. Just missed on draft position, and Giants stank, so cautious. Again, I don't want building the situation too strongly. The player kind of makes the situation, but I understand what you mean.
And especially with wide receiver, I'm betting on talent with wide receiver. Running back, it's situation because running back in game go Burr, but wide receiver, I want to bet on the talent.
And yeah, productive old players are always a go-to in Dynasty. But again, you're trying to balance points and value, and older good players do decline in value, but they do provide those points. So I'm trying to balance both sides of that value and points equation with you. But yeah, old players are good, even in a year where we should expect to see more breakouts into the top 12 wide receiver in the first 3 years because of all that shit I said earlier. The average age, or the most common age, not just the average age, most will be 26, 27 or older. That'll be the majority of the group. We've seen 1 year where the majority of the group was under that age. The old guys are the ones who are good enough. They're in their prime because they're not actually old. That's literally the prime of an NFL wide receiver's career. 27 to 31. They're not old. They're not aging. that's when they're at their peak. So early on, you're not at your peak. You're building, you're growing, you're learning, or you're Jefferson, frankly, or Chase, and a couple others, Calvin Johnson, obviously, who peak a little earlier than most, but they still play through this window being fantastic. So yeah, just to point out that the old players actually aren't the old players, but you do want to be aware of that value side, because dynasty players just are never going to accept that a 27-year-old is actually the premium guy, even though he is. But next year will be 28 and in his prime, but whatever. Would you move the 103 for Breece Hall? In a Superflex? No. Maybe in a standard league, I think that'd be okay. Yeah. I think that'd be great. In a Superflex, the chances that one of those QBs falls to the 103 is pretty decent. And like we said, we've got this top 5 tier. I think it's okay. Don't get me wrong, especially if you're trying for running back. But I feel like you could get a plus on a Barkley or another couple of running backs I really like I like Breece Hall, and I like him a lot, by the way. But Breece Hall's value maintains a little better than them. Same with Bijan Robinson and Gibbs, to be honest. Their value's in there. ETN we've mentioned a few times. Saquon Barkley you've mentioned a few times. Talking about the old guys, CMC probably ranks and has more value, but probably easier to get a plus in some sort of trade for. And if you're going for running back points, go for running back points. And that's CMC. And so I think this trade is fair. I'd want to consider where those other players are in the league if there isn't a better option, even in a super flex. And if it's not a super flex, yeah, I think it's fine. Basically, I think it's about even. It's up to you. You on mute, or I can't hear you. One or the other.
It's not a super flex. It's pretty darn close. But in a super flex, I'm with you. Like you're either going to get Marvin Harrison or one of the top 2 quarterbacks. I would rather have any of those 3 than Breece Hall. And that's not saying that Breece Hall is a bad player, but you mentioned Bijan, you mentioned CMC. Like those are players who are probably closer to the 103, or you can drop down, and we just mentioned ETN, but you can drop down and then get a plus, like a big plus. So you probably get ETN in a first for the 103, things like that, where and it's again not necessarily the way you want to go, but the way I normally play it, I would be trying to trade Breece Hall this year or next year to get a young wide receiver plus a first. Like that's how I play running back. So trading a pick to go get an established running back is an early pick to go get one of the top is not necessarily the way I attack dynasty most of the time. I'd rather trade into one of the running backs that people think are dust, like Derrick Henry, and go pay, a second for Derrick Henry and get, 85-90% of the production of Breece Hall, but you didn't spend anything. You still got the 103. You make your neighbor's pick, your Marvin Harrison pick, or you make your Jaden Daniels pick, and all of a sudden your team is better than if you had traded for Breece Hall. So it's not a knock at Breece Hall, but it's a stylistic thing where like that's a hard trade for me to make. Vacuum.
We're both saying right in the ballpark. If
it's close.
Guy, you're doing good. I mean, I think that's pretty good.
I still want a little plus on Breece Hall if I'm giving up the 103. Well, because
again, it's just a super flex aspect for me. But you're right. There's also Bowers in a non-super flex, and there's some upside there.
Yeah,
I'd probably rather Hall, but it's close, very close. Yep. Yeah. James Tucker, best cheap tight end. Pat Fairmouth. No, who was the other? Jake Ferguson, I think, is really interesting in his current value as well. I'm going to go lower because I think Zach might say that was my answer because he's been saying it this offseason more than
he already got the Ingram and
Ingram's good.
Kittle.
Kittle's my higher price guy.
But he's not higher price. He's still
well
below
compared
Kelce.
to Jake Ferguson.
He's still below Kelce, and Kelce has fallen a ton. Or you wait until you're 4 or 5 or 6 weeks in the season and go to the TJ Hawkinson, the team that rosters TJ Hawkinson, and say, hey, I'll give you whatever for, because Hawkinson got injured in, I think it was November last year. So like he's still got a long recovery, but if you can shine it on and he comes back in like week 14 and all of a sudden you got TJ Hawkinson for the playoffs, you're feeling pretty good about it. So you can kind of piece it together till then. But I love what you did going to acquire Evan Ingram, because that he is the poster child for undervalued tight end points. But then to me, Kittle is also the same thing. And it doesn't even matter. So Kittle is the guy who tight end premium doesn't matter because he doesn't score his points through receptions. He scores his points through yards after catch and touchdowns. And so, like, Kittle is a perennially undervalued because people look at his stats and like, but he's good.
Kittle is like the Kyler Murray of my tight ends, just consistently been on the top of my value chart. I'm like, man, I'm getting boring. A few last points. I think you're fine because you've got Ingram. You're pretty good. In fact, you have access to some difference-making points, which is rare at tight end, and I think Ingram's you got, so you don't have to do anything else. I think Bowers is less risky than you think at his rookie pick, although it is unusual, so I get it. Those are my last two things. I think you've actually got your guys. You got Ingram, and you're pretty good with it. But yeah, Kittle's a guy. If I'm not outside of someone thinking Kelce is dust, because we have experienced some of that. Kittle's the guy up there, and then down below, I like taking no risk flyers on Jake Ferguson, who actually already showed something last year. Greg DeLuch, if you want to go low as well. Dolchich, I forget which is accurate, which is the one I made up.
I like DeLuch. I like when you say DeLuch, but it's Dolchich.
All right. Cheap, no lows flares because it can drop pretty easy too. Jake Ferguson probably carries a little value at this point. You got to think. But Nico Collins gave wide receiver Clogger Hoarders hope. Yeah, and to be fair, again, when I talk about happening more and less often, it is always worth keeping in mind the less often happen. And that's where the value conversation comes in. The year before last year was when I got not attacked, is nothing that strong, but that's when people really like Nico Collins, and I was firmly in that I don't like the rookie profile or his year one, even for his draft capital. I'm out. I think you're all crazy. Then last year heading up, I heard no hype, and I had no reason to hate him, because if he was on your roster, you're drafting him at ADP, or you're just holding him from the previous year. That was literally, I would say that's fine. So technically, I didn't get owned by Nico Collins. But if I had been asked last year as out fervently as I was the year before, I probably would have said the same stuff. Less likely. Only 30% of breakouts are anywhere near the type of arc we're talking about for Collins. Collins was one of those rare ones. And based on that, because it happened again, so I went and looked, I think I've been too low on the prospects of those lower odds after the hit. I actually think they're a little more substantial. Like Hunter Renfrow and some others kind of drag the average down, or the most common result, but most end up being pretty fine for at least minimum for at least a year or two. It's not like they all drop off the face of the earth the following year like Hunter Renfrow. So I've had to come up on Nico Collins even on that second tier evaluation when the rare thing happens. I can tell you that 70% of wide receivers do this at least before doing that. And you can always be like, well, those 30% if they're coming for thirds and fourth round picks, but have your fun. Yeah. Again, that value thing, anything you spend on that, you're not putting together with something else to get something a little more certain, which is kind of the route I try to go. But sometimes you just got to make a pick. Sometimes you just got to fill a roster spot. And we should have our fun with that too. 30%, mofos. James Tucker, JMO this year. Yeah, and I think his value is low enough. Like, I can't hate someone like holding on, but it is a more likely roster clogger. And if he has value in a trade, I'd more likely probably take the value. But yeah, his value is low enough. I'm not going to hate anyone from liking the potential because again, 30%, bare minimum. But yeah, he would definitely be on my that doesn't happen very often list. Come on, guys. If he has value, get the value. But Nico Collins.
But it's so hard to let go, Peter.
It is. I've been there, man. I am there still. If we talk about the lesser mentioned members of my dynasty goals, I think I still have Harry somewhere sitting on the roster. Not really because I have hope, but because like it just feels I should be punished. I should continue to be punished by rostering.
It's the gif of the guy in the windstorm in the rain with the flag. That's you just holding on to N'Keal Harry no matter what, flying in the face of everything.
I deserve this. The goal of trading is to bulldoze the other team. No, I mean people play like that, and you can. Like I know very aggressive traders who are successful, but it's not. But it's fantasy. It's not like it is fun and it is a game, and you are trying to win. Someone that's an aggressive trader trying to beat other. That's fine. That's fine. Our job is to try to not be taken advantage of that way against those players. But yeah, sure. You can play that.
Like I get that this was tongue in cheek, James, but like there are players that you trade with or you're in leagues with and you watch them operate and oftentimes like that will upset the balance of the league so much that the league is defunct. But then there's the other side of this coin, and we mentioned J Mike. He's at J Mike Tech on Twitter, co-host of mine, really the host of the Dynasty Dummies. And he may be the most brilliant trader that I have ever witnessed maneuver in a league, where he will trade with you, he will crush you, he will take your soul, and you will thank him for it, because the way he does it is not like it's never I just like he has such insight with the way he wants to build and what you're trying to accomplish, and sometimes he'll figure out where you're being short-sighted, and like he's not really taking advantage of you because that's what you're trying to do. But when you look back from it, 6 months later, you're like, oh man, I just got crushed. So like you can dominate trades without like bulldozing your opponent, and the league will sustain that way. But if you're going into it, and like I'm in leagues with people like that where they got to win every trade, and it's so often you're like,
it doesn't always have to
whatever.
be a dick move either, or it can be a dick move but fun.
Yeah,
like Daddy's Home, Mike. That I had him on my podcast once, and that's his primary way, as far as I understood what he was talking about, and I took some nonsense. Of playing Dynasty, he is going to win trades. That's kind of the way he approaches Dynasty. And he's great fun to have in leagues and just great fun in general. Don't say I said that. And a very good Dynasty player. So, like, you can play like that, and it's dickish, but it's not being a dick, And right. Just to let you off the hook there, if you feel that way about trades, there are many successful Dynasty players who do honestly try and win trades. That's how they try and win. And there's a reason it's a thing. So, yeah, that's fun, too. Again, an alternative way. I try to go the other way because I don't have the tea for that level of play. But, who else was it? You mentioned J Mike. I think Matt Price, despite his value inclination to talk about it with value, I don't think he's a trade winner. I think he tries to win through the way he exploits trades. I think Ryan McDowell leans that way, to be honest, and he's one of the nicest men you can meet too. But that's his primary goal in Dynasty, I think. I think John Bosch to an extent, but I put him in a game theory camp, which is something slightly different. But he'd be focused on winning trades. If you ask me, Bob Gilchrist as well. Yeah.
But you can also like Bosch is really, to me, interesting to deal with because
it's very interesting. I like the way he thinks. It's very different. than me.
And he and I are very similar, where we're no nonsense, but
Very much
we'll
so.
also tell you, like, if I say, okay, I'll offer you 2 firsts for this player, and he'll be like, no, I need this. I'm like, okay, well, we'll do that, or we won't get a trade done. And that, like, to me, being that kind of frank, and like, if you offer me a trade and it's not a trade I want, I'm just going to reject it. Like, no, that's not close. And if you come back with something else, like, it's not personal. I'm not upset that you offered me that trade. It just didn't, like, if it wasn't something I was looking for, and you send that trade, I'm like, no, that's cool. But I'm not necessarily doing the legwork on your trade, if that makes sense. Like, if I want to make a trade, if I'm identifying my team having a need, then I will go do legwork. But if I'm looking at my team and I don't necessarily have a move that I need to make, you're in charge of doing the legwork, because you're trying to improve your team, and we can come up with something together. But, like, I'm not a dicker back and forth guy. We're not haggling over prices, but
He'll block you if you offer him a second, stuff like that.
Well, but you know that I don't care about the second, so you should know that. You can ask me for a second.
That's Leo Pasigo's way of playing. That's different. You guys are awesome. Thanks, James. You too, man. I love the content. Last question. What is a fair trade for Jefferson? There's almost none. I like to talk about a tier of value where there is nothing. I mean, there's nothing. There's no exact measurement of what you have to give to get Mahomes or Allen or Hurts or Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Right now, they easily fit into that category of almost anything's a fair trade, but, let's not be silly. I think the max any player should be valued is like 3 firsts, but that tier of value, you could see there's a lot of wiggle room with that,
The interesting piece to me about 3 firsts is those players in that tier that are worth 3 firsts are actually better than the 3 firsts, unless the firsts end up being, like, so if you were looking at this year's draft, right, Jefferson is worth the 101 plus a first, because the 101 is like an elite, like a top tier quarterback or a potential top tier quarterback. And, like, so he's worth the best player in one of the best drafts that we've seen, plus at least another first. But if you're talking just random first, Peter, I agree with you. It's got to be 3. But if I'm the Jefferson owner, I don't want to give him up for that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I mean. There's no, like, you can't. Yeah.
So James, this is something that gets missed a lot, and even by, like, a lot of analysts don't necessarily talk about a first. Like, firsts aren't created equal, and drafts aren't created equal. So, the 105 in this year's draft was better than the 103 last year. And if you're looking at drafts in the aggregate and pulling back, the further from the 101 you get, the less chance those picks have of returning a player that is valuable. And then if you start thinking about somebody like Justin Jefferson, how many players with the ability and production of Justin Jefferson have come out in the last 10 years? Not very many. Like, and so you have to kind of understand, like, what you're getting or what you're giving up. So, like, if you're trying to acquire Jefferson and
start with another wide receiver and throw something on it, or a running back of really high value, or a tight end of really high value, and you throw something on top of it, of really high value. Like, that's the way I think about it.
So whatever you have to, and for me, I would almost rather acquire Jefferson. So, like, you mentioned the running back, like that would be how I would go about building my team, is go fire off the running back. Although I would have, like, Jefferson would have been a player that I traded for back in his like I did that in his rookie season. Like I traded Michael Thomas, who was consensus top 6 wide receiver, for Justin Jefferson, straight up, before Thomas got hurt, before Jefferson broke out. Like, but now you're gonna have to pay for him because he's done it. And I
almost think there's no situation unless that team is in a situation where they need to quote unquote build. Like, that's what you need to get a trade done. But yeah, you're looking for the other rule I would have just in general with trades. I'm trying to send as few things as possible, not to give them less, but to make sure I'm trying to not trade calculator them. If I add my entire bench together in the trade calculator, it's what's the same as Justin Jefferson. No one wants it. You have to be giving them things they want. So if you add Aaron Jones next to George Kittle next to like Michael Pittman, all things that are pretty valuable, add enough of them together, you can get a Justin Jefferson value, but no one's going to want it. So you got to start big or go home, you know. So you're starting with Lamb, you're starting with AJ Brown, you're starting with Sam Laporta, and you're adding something else just as shiny to it. Maybe a third, but I'm trying to get it in 2. Like, that's the way I try and approach a trade to get Jefferson. But honestly, I don't think it's a great year for it. Let's wait till mid-season if you really want to trade for Jefferson, and then the memory thing might help. Because I think he's still going to be Jefferson, but, you know, that team might be rocky. He's not going to hit his peak by peak fantasy points ever by week 6. So it might not be the ideal time.
How dare you disparage Sam Darnold, right? Peter?
Sam
Darnold.
Eddie Munster. No. Is this a Josh Downs tweet? Yeah, most of my tweets are actually Josh Downs tweets. He's Tyler Boyd-esque to me, who actually had a terrible second year, by the way, and actually broke out in his third year. But again, he crossed that Tyler Boyd. That's kind of my expectation for Josh Downs. And he literally crossed the Tyler Boyd threshold in terms of overall expectation his rookie year. It's not too dissimilar from JSN, but what JSN did in the last part of the first season, Josh Downs did over the entirety of the first season. It kind of shows you the difference of what their rookie seasons brought. But yeah, I think Josh Downs is a solid add at where he's at. But again, I have lower expectations than most of the players we've talked about for Downs. Like, I'm hoping for a Tyler Boyd like career at Josh Downs. I've been pretty happy with that. And very happy, in fact. So let's keep it real, you know. But yeah, everything's a Josh Downs tweet. Jacob, biggest edge in Dynasty is the discrepancy between perception of the top guys and their production relative to lower tier. You can get Deontay plus a first for Zay Flower types.
Yeah. And that's like that to me. You're exactly right. And I'll go down to like, if you've got ADP up, I will go down to like pick 40 to like 70 and go look in that range and see what I think the players are that have value, that have upward mobility, and the players that I think are overvalued based on production. So like that's exactly the range of players that I'm looking, although Deontay Johnson is now lower than that. But like Adam Thielen was a top 24 wide receiver last year. The husk, the shell of Adam Thielen in that same offense where Deontay Johnson is now probably going to be the slot receiver and see a ton of targets. So like I agree with you. That is the easiest way to mine value in Dynasty is you're shopping the store brand rather than the name brand. And they're made at the same factory. So like that's what you're doing with Deontay Johnson getting into Flowers. And yeah, Flowers has got years on Deontay. So like you're giving up a little bit because that's where the value is. But you got to understand, Jacob, to me, the kind of 3 states of value where you've got right now, we don't have points value. Like, so nobody's thinking about that. So that's where your advantage is right now. But there is the you can dream on this value, which applies to rookie picks as well. you've got the like predicted value of career arc, and then you've got points value. And so there are, to me, three distinct kind of value silos or phases of value. And you're taking advantage of your ability to get the points plus a pick, which gives you that future dream value, which then you can use again because that's fungible for Zay Flowers, where everybody has got that like career arc production value in mind. So like absolutely, you take the edge by acquiring the value that's not being paid attention to in whatever point in the calendar year we are.
James Tucker, having a trade to help both teams set up to trade down the road is diabolical, and I love it. It's grinding season. Thank you, Dave. I traded away Jeffy for Garrett Olson in a first and 2 seconds. Yeah, I think that's okay. I think he came out pretty well. But again, he didn't hit the mega load, but I think he did pretty good, pretty happy. You're building value, gotten younger. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, if Garrett Wilson, like, just hypothetically, if Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy for an entire year, I think Garrett Wilson is in close to the echelon of Jefferson. Maybe not quite in terms of like the career arc value that people are seeing, but like pretty darn close. And I think production wise, you're close, and you got a first in 2 seconds. So like that's not a bad trade at all.
I would say I don't entirely agree with the reasoning at 17 is significantly more than 15 in the same way that
it's like 2 more a week.
It's like she's 17 and I'm only 35. So in 5 years, we'll be like, it's having a little fun with the fact that the numbers sound close in some contexts, but not in this particular context. Like based on depending on your scoring or your starting lineup, over baseline in terms of actual points that matter towards winning against top 3 teams in your league could be as close as like the 5 to the 7. And then those 2 points look like a whole lot more than they do in this particular number scenario. You know, it's actually probably more like 4 to 6, but still. And those 2 points are actually significant. But again, you're talking about projection. I would go to what they've already done to do that kind of a calculation. But Jefferson's value has been significantly more. And again, just in general, players that have done that, since we're talking about projections, are more likely to keep doing that. Although I actually like Garrett Wilson, so I don't think you're far off here at all. Yeah. And that is the end of it, because I think it's most of our regulars on here because Twitter won't tweet out or allow me to tweet directly out, I guess. And they probably hear about it there first.
Elon's trying to get your $8 a month or whatever it is. He's squeezing you, Pete.
That's my cigarette budget for the month. I'm not doing that. But I appreciate you all who did find us. Really, it was great talking to you all.
Yeah.
Again, that's what I'm harping on here. It's actually really significant. Like if the baseline for a wide receiver, depending on most of your scoring formats, is probably around 12 points. So again, if you can get 12 by having a wide receiver, that's a baseline of wide receiver in your league, then the difference is actually between like 6 and 4. And hopefully that demonstrates how like 6, that 2 extra points, even though 2 is really a short, small number. It's getting late. Okay, you counter it real quick. 1, 2. How could it matter that much? Because those 2 points don't come anywhere else. Okay, I don't know. I have to find a better way of phrasing this. There are only 500 points every year that are actually scored over baseline. Justin Jefferson has access to 2 more of them every week than Garrett Wilson does. And they add up over the week. So you can imagine once you add the few players who are actually scoring baseline, over baseline, like Wilson in your projection, and Jefferson own projection, those 2 become really significant when you start talking about competing against the top 3 teams to actually win, because they're co-opting more of those extra 500 points again. And remember, that's total. And you've got per week numbers here. So I actually multiplied those by 17. And those two, okay, yeah. I've got a child story in my head where, a guy had to put one piece of rice on the first chessboard piece square and then 2 pieces of rice in the second. And by the time you get to number 14, you literally need to start bringing not number 14, but truckloads of rice in to get them on the square, because those two add up real quick if you keep doubling and doubling and doubling. But anyway, those two add up over time to be quite a significant chunk of the very small pool of points that actually matter. Again, it's not that Garrett Wilson's points don't matter, but that too is a significant difference. It's like what? Why would I run a top 3 wide receiver this year than a top 15? The numbers really aren't that different. Well, yeah, but one helps you win a hell of a lot more than the other, like significantly more. That 2 might be a small number, but it's a really significant number in terms of outscoring someone else.
I was really hoping your children's story was going to be caps for sale.
But maybe. Yeah. It's about getting married or something. I can't remember. You want my daughter's hand in marriage, this is all you have to do, kind of a thing. And there's also the high-end weekly finishes that add up to extra scoring. Yeah. The variation actually matters a lot when you're talking about points per game. But I don't think standard deviation really applies. We're literally talking every week you're projecting that Jefferson adds 2 more points to your roster than Wilson. And so by the end of that season, that's don't make me do math. 34 points than Wilson. 34 more points than Wilson. And again, just think of it in a best ball context instead of a weekly game, which is actually what Dynasty Coach is actually talking about. The other team is 34 points above the Wilson team if those were the only 2 players. There are only 500 points available to spread out
to get up.
Total.
Yeah.
So we're already down to there are only 400 left, and he's already 34 points above you. And you've got 10 other teams in your league trying to grab those 400 points, and all of them have some of them. So the pool drastically shrinks. And so, 34 points in a pool that drastically shrinks to 0 is a significant deal. 34, right? Yeah, 34. Something like that. Yeah, and again, it's relative. It's not that Wilson's points are bad. It's just that I actually think 2 is significant. And again, we're talking about projections. Jefferson could score 14 points on average in next year, and Wilson scores 16. So there's a range of outcomes here. Again, I don't think the trade was terrible. I just think in general, when thinking about the difference between 17 and 15, that should be thought of as more significant than necessarily is. Wide receiver average scoring, by the way, I don't know if you've ever looked at it. It's a lot higher than you'd think. Like a top 24 wide receivers averages like 14 to 15 points. So let me put it to you this way. You want to start a Justin Jefferson in the top 12, or do you want to start any top 24 wide receiver that average about 14 points a game? Garrett Wilson's better than that. Again, I'm just saying, when we're looking at averages and projections, numbers can sometimes be deceiving. And Dynasty Coach point here is really significant. So high variance in scoring actually matters a lot, because weekly winning potential in a game that's a weekly contest instead of a best ball league in the context I was putting in, it's actually much more important than the average or even the average projection. You have to have those 30-point weeks.
Have the variance,
30 and 2. I don't want 14 every week. Give me 2 one week and 30 the next week. That means I win 1 week, lose 1 week, whereas the other team just loses both weeks because they're not outscoring their opponents enough. There's a lot that goes into it. No condition at this point in the night to get into it further than that. But I do think 2 points in that range is significant. It's like, why would I start number 1 wide receiver when I can start the number 24? Well, because the other one wins. You know what I mean? Probably not. I'm probably making no sense at this point.
You look good, though. I go by height anyway. Like, whatever.
Yeah, I'm throwing out fictional numbers between 2 and 30. You get me? I'm talking about the idea in general of the variance mattering, not the actual number I plucked out of a hat. I'm not even wearing a hat. Yeah, and again, it's just a perspective. It's not like I'm therefore saying Wilson sucks, but I do think if you're just basing like next year, this player's only going to score 2 more points. Okay, even if you know that for a fact, which again, we're talking a lot about how we don't. Those 2 points are significant. That's all. Like, again, you would lose against the Justin Jefferson team. That's pretty significant. Your other roster spots would have to make it up, which again goes to the 500 points. How many players do you have actually scoring some of those 500 points versus how many do they have? And he's already got a 2-point advantage. And once we spread 500 points over a week, it's not a remarkably large pool. Over 17 weeks, sorry, it's actually not a remarkably large pool to try and grab. Blah, 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 blah. I haven't been able to catch you guys lately. Been missing it. Well, you found us tonight when almost no one did because I'm not.
We got musked. So
we appreciate it. We got musked. Oh, sounds like met a skunk.
Yeah. But all right, we made it. We'll look over there, Peter.